if you're going to go with an outside person to help you get booked on podcasts, you need to vet them carefully. You need to ask them questions like, how many shows are you going to pitch me to a week? The proper answer from them would be, we're not going to have a quota. What we're going to do is try to find the right show for you. And when we find the right shows and we think there's a good opportunity, we'll pitch you, but we can't guarantee, or we can't tell you we're going to pitch you a certain number of times any given week. Welcome to the Certified Badass Online Marketing Podcast, where being a badass has less to do with what you wear and what music you listen to, and everything to do with whether you've got the thriving online business of your dreams. I'm your renegade thinking Harvard Law grad turned online entrepreneur host, Bobby Klinck. In my years building my thriving business, the most important lesson I've learned is that being a badass online marketer isn't about secret strategies or ninja tactics. It's about doing the basic stuff right and showing the F up. So each week here on the show, you'll get clear, easy to execute guidance on how to build your online business and a swift kick in the ass or two to make sure you're getting it done. Hey there, welcome to episode 133 of the Certified Badass Online Marketing Podcast. I'm your host, Bobby Klinck, and I'm excited for today's show because we're going to be talking about something that I'm passionate about, that I've got some funny stories to tell you about, and that really hits home because I'm doing a podcast. Specifically, we're going to talk about how to pitch yourself to podcasts the right way. In other words, the certified badass way, not the dumb way. And if you don't want to be on podcasts, you don't have to think about this as podcasts. It could be pitching yourself for any kind of guest opportunity. If you want to do a guest blog post somewhere, great. We're talking about it. The same principles will apply there. If you want to be a guest in someone's membership, same thing. All of these same concepts will apply anytime you're pitching yourself to someone else. And it's something that I've been thinking about because if you stuck around, if you listened to episode 123 and my plan for 2020, I talked about that one of my goals really is, and one of my focuses for this year is to get onto more podcasts, to get onto more stages, to appear in more people's memberships, like communities, to offer kind of guest expert teaching. And so with that in mind, I'm thinking about this a lot because I wanted to think about, how would I do this the right way? And what got me thinking about it is that I've seen a lot of people do it the wrong way. And so I want to help you, if this is something you're thinking about, to really, do it the right way and to help you get off on the right foot in both in the way you're thinking about it, but also in the way you're approaching it. So that's what this episode is all about. It's basically a crash course on how to not be dumb when you pitch yourself to be a guest expert somewhere. So with that, I want to dive in, and I'm going to start by maybe something that'll be interesting. I'm going to tell you some horror stories, some examples of things that I've seen people do when they pitch themselves to podcasts that just are not going to work. And so I'm going to use these to hopefully get your mind thinking. And because I'm a podcast host, I get pitches all the time. So I see a lot of bad things and I want to help you avoid them. So really the reason I'm doing this podcast is I was telling this story to my team about something that happened recently. I said, you got to do a podcast about this. I said, okay, fine. Because I've done a podcast in the past about being a guest, about podcast guesting with my friend, Nicole Holland, who helps people get booked on podcasts. I've never used her service, but I'm almost certain. And I know she would do it the right way. But I kind of wanted to go into it again because it's been a long time. And what brought this about was literally, I got like 2 or 3 podcast pitches like right at the same time. And one of them was just like so laughably bad that I was amused by it. This guy sends me this email. I have no idea who he is. As far as I know, we're not connected on social. We don't know each other. I don't know how he found me. I don't know how he came across me, but he sent an email to basically the contact us email on my website. So that's the level of connection that he had with me. And it was a very short email, which I guess at least that was in some sense kind of good, I guess, because he wasn't going to waste a bunch of my time. But it basically starts by saying, I know you're busy, so I'm going to keep this brief. And he said, I started out knocking on doors and, now I've made $100,000 in a day. To learn more, go to, and then he puts a link to his website. It says, love to come on your show. Let me know if you'd be interested. And that's it. Literally, that is the sum total of the email. There is no explanation of what he even does, what he teaches, what his area of expertise is, why I might be interested, why anything that he has to say would help you, my listeners, much less how it would fit in or not fit in with what I teach. And you as a listener, you probably know that someone who that's their approach, chances are they don't have a fans first approach, which is kind of my view. And they are not going to be teaching the same thing I am. I don't know what this person teaches, but like me, I literally never even went to the website because I just thought it was so ridiculously bad. Now, I got another one that at the same time that wasn't horrible, but it was largely, it was just hey, let's swap. You come onto my show and I'll come onto your show. And I was like, okay, whatever. But, that wasn't a pitch that was going to attract me. But another horror story that I want to tell you about is more subtle. And it was a case where it kind of proves a point that I want you to be thinking about. So it was right after I had done my, series of episodes where I was kind of first starting to talk about fans first and connection-based marketing and the importance of taking the time to connect with people, your peers, people that you want to, connect with and all of those things. And I'm talking about that stuff on my episode. And then I get pitched by someone. But I don't get pitched by someone. I get pitched by their team member to be on my show. And again, this is a more subtle horror story, but it proves a point. If these people had listened really and kind of really paid attention to my podcast episodes and what I was talking about and what I was teaching, it might have been a clue to them, hey, this guy cares about personal connection, so maybe it shouldn't come from a third party. It should come from the person who wants to get booked. Just a crazy thought there. But these are some of the things. And again, I for the most part, I get these emails because I don't make it easy for people to find me. So for the most part, people have to search around, and would have to try to find a contact for me. Unless maybe I see some in DMs from time to time. I don't know that I have, but maybe I've seen some in DMs. But, the other people who pitch me tend to be people who know me. And so it's not a horrible pitch. Oftentimes it's maybe it's not a good fit, but it's not a horror story. But there are some of those horror stories. And I wanted to share those. And I wanted to talk about a couple of concepts before we get to the nitty-gritty of how to do this right. And there's two concepts I want to talk about here. One is that when you are looking for guest appearances, whether it's podcasts, speaking on stages, or anything else, I want you to focus on quality over quantity. Now, again, this should make sense to you, right? Because if you listen to what I talk about the power of focus. I talk about how I built my business by really focusing on, being ever present in a couple of different Facebook groups and, becoming known in that community. So if I'm preaching that, obviously, generally, I'm going to think that quality is more important than quantity. Now, again, I'm not saying that less is always better. I mean, if you could get on 100 perfect podcasts or 50 perfect podcasts, I want you to get on 100, right? I mean, there's nothing wrong with that. But it's better. I mean, if you could land one powerful, really perfect guest appearance, that's going to be more important than 30 or 40 not so great guest appearances. And so I want you to bring that mindset to it. And if you think about it, if you're coming to it from that mindset of saying, I want to be on, those 3 perfect shows, and if that's where you're bringing your mindset to, I think you can immediately understand why you're likely to approach the whole process differently, because it's not a numbers game, right? You don't have to try to pitch thousands of people. You want to get on those 3 shows. And again, I use 3 here just as a number. Maybe it's 10 for you. Whatever the number is, you get my point. If there's a discrete number of shows that you're like, that is the perfect show for me and I really want to be on that, you can think through that specific piece. So that's kind of the first big concept I want you thinking about when you're approaching this. Quality is more important than quantity. And so that should shape how you approach it. Now, the second concept that I want you to get is, especially with a podcast, the personal relationship that you build with the host is also important. I will just tell you that hands down, without question, the shows that have been the most impactful for my business are the ones where I have a personal connection. I am actually connected to the host, which tends to mean a couple things. Number one, the interview is often better because there's kind of a natural connection there. But also, because there's a connection, they are likely to be more invested in, promoting it, even if only subconsciously so. But also, if you have a connection with the person, chances are that your audiences will align better. And you're not coming out of left field. But even if you are coming out of left field for their audience, if the host can talk about personal stories that they've had with you, it's going to be more impactful. So again, all of those little things about a personal connection matter, but also, if you build the personal connection, it's not just the podcast itself that has value. Maybe you build a long-lasting relationship with that host that could help to serve your business a year from now, 2 years from now, heck, even 5 years from now. But that only happens if you're focusing on building the relationship, not just trying to get a guest appearance on their show. So those 2 themes, kind of when you think about those 2 concepts, you can see how oftentimes they're going to go hand in hand. If you're focused on quality over quantity, you will also be focused on building personal relationships. Now, again, obviously, if someone that you already know and have a business relationship or have interacted with online and all of those things, if they are already if they have a podcast, hey, that's great, because that's a short-circuited way. You can reach out to the people you know, and there's a natural kind of, rapport that's there from the beginning. But what I'm talking about here largely is the process of getting, pitching yourself to shows where you don't have that relationship necessarily at the outset. So again, if one of my friends in the space who comes to me and says, hey, I was having this podcast idea, maybe we could collaborate, that's going to be an easy pitch, right? Because, they could literally call me or we're going to jump on Zoom because we're friends. So that's not the situation I'm talking about. I'm talking about the context where you don't yet have that relationship. And so, where you're going to have to build it along the way. So that's what we'll be kind of chatting about. Now, with that kind of all as a way of backdrop, now I want to talk to an important question you need to consider if you are thinking, hey, I want to get booked on whether it's podcasts or speaking on stages or any of those things. And that is the question of, do you hire someone to do the process for you? Do you hire effectively, a PR person or a booking agent? And there are a lot of companies that will do this for you. I mentioned earlier at the beginning that I had Nicole Holland. I mean, I think it was one of my first 20 episodes, probably one of my first 15 episodes, that I had her on the show. And so she does this for a living, but there are a lot of other people too. And I just want to give you some things and some information and some things to think about in the process. Number one, I want to dispel a myth. A lot of people, I think, come at it and think that having a booking agent will somehow add clout to your pitch. In other words, if that person is pitching, they must be useful and they must have, they must be a good guest to have on a show. Now, that is not the case. Now, there are some people where, for example, there might be some guest bookers who have connections with particular people. Like if Nicole came to me and said, hey, I've got this, guest that I'm working with. I think they'd be great for your show. She's going to get my attention because we're friends, right? Because I know her and I know, she's now, just a friend of mine. And so if she brought that person to me, I would assume that she is serving me well as a friend and peer as much as anything else. So in that context, it can matter. But if you're just going with one of the big agencies that's out there, let me just tell you, when I get an email from a random, like booking agent, that doesn't make me say, ooh, this is a better guest for me to consider. I have literally, it makes no difference in my consideration, except, for example, I made that comment, and here's something to think about. If you were pitching me, for example, hopefully your booking agent would say, hey, if you're going to pitch Bobby, you should probably be the one to do it. Maybe they could give you some a template or an idea for some email, what to say in the email, but the agent should tell you Bobby's messaging is all about personal connection. So if we're going to pitch him, you need to be the one to pitch him, not me. So if they don't do that, they're not serving you well. But what I'll tell you is that a lot of the agencies that are out there are not serving their clients well. And there's a couple of different reasons. Number one, largely the way they operate is that you will say, I want to get booked on X number of shows per month. And so they view their job as simply trying to fill that quota, fill that number, get you booked on that number of shows. Now, over the long term, I think they would recognize that if all of the shows they get you booked on are really bad, it's probably not going to, end well for them. But I can tell you that in the past, when I was working with one of these bigger booking agents, and again, I want to be very clear since I've mentioned Nicole Holland, it was not her. I've never actually hired her. It was someone else. They were booking me on shows. And at one point, they booked me on a show that was all about Bitcoin and cryptocurrency. Now, I have literally never spoken about Bitcoin and or cryptocurrency other than to say, I don't really understand that stuff. So why in the world, and again, I canceled the interview. I said, hey, I don't think I'm a good fit here. But why in the world they would have even thought for a second that this was a show that I should be booked on? The only possible way is if they simply said, hey, we need to get him his numbers. Now, something that I want you to think about, and again, you need to be thinking about this as you are, if you're considering outsourcing. This company also helps hosts find their guests. Now, that, when I think about it, creates a bit of a weird dynamic. They are getting paid on both sides of the coin. They're getting paid to book you as a guest on shows, but also by the host to book guests into their shows. So sometimes I'm guessing what happens is they just have, they need to meet a quota on one side or the other. And so they simply say, okay, here you go. Now, I don't know for sure that that's what happened, but I will tell you that I think most of these bigger agencies, that's what they're going to do. And I hear people talk about, that their services will include, we will pitch you to 10 shows a week. And I'm like, that is not a selling point. That's a bad thing. Because again, that's telling me that they're just, going down a list They're not being thoughtful about the process. Now, separately, I will tell you that what can sometimes happen is, again, because they are basically on a quota trying to get you booked, and quantity matters more to them than quality, and there's so much that they have to do to try to hit those numbers, that what it ends up meaning is they're being very impersonal, and for the most part, they are simply spamming people. And what I mean by that is, like, I once had this happen when I was working with a booking agent where I got an email from a show host. I didn't know the person, who said, "Hey, I thought you would want to know that this was happening. I assume this is not you and you're not the one behind this and you're not doing this." But they forwarded me this email chain where the person who was responsible for booking me, and again, it was a bigger agency, and so it was just a more junior person, or I don't even know the role of the person, had literally sent the exact same email, like the exact same follow-up email to this person, to this host, like 4 times. Not even saying, "Hey, I know I've said this before, but just wanted to ping you again." Literally just the exact same email. And as you can imagine, that is not effective. Not only is it not effective, it's going to turn off the host to say, "Well, I don't want to have that person on my show." So again, be careful. So this is a long way of me saying that if you're going to go with an outside person to help you get booked on podcasts, you need to vet them carefully, and you need to ask them questions. You need to ask them questions like, how many shows are you going to pitch me to a week? And that's a really good question to ask, because a lot of them are going to say, think that you want a high number. So they're going to give you a number. If they give you a number, if I were you, I would say, "You are not for me." And again, you don't say this directly to them, but in your mind, that's what you should say. Because the proper answer from them would be, "Well, we're not going to have a quota. What we're going to do is try to find the right show for you. And when we find the right shows and we think there's a good opportunity, we'll pitch you, but we can't guarantee, or we can't tell you we're going to pitch you a certain number of times any given week." Some answer like that, that's what you should be looking for if you're hiring a booking agent. And I would also ask them, do you also serve as, someone who represents shows in getting guests? And if they say yes, I would be wary, and I would ask them questions like, I would ask them questions like, well, how do you ensure, that there's not a conflict of interest, and just see what they have to say. And another question I would want to ask a booking agent these days is, I would say, what is the process for you finding the right shows for me and tailoring the pitch, et cetera, and just see what they say. Because you're going to hear me go down this very long explanation of what we're doing internally, and you'll get a sense of what I think the right way is to really tailor things. And so you would want to hear their description of how they're going to do it, so that you can decide whether they're going to be doing it in a way that will serve you and serve your brand. So those are some of the questions I could ask. But the broader point I would say is, you don't need a booking agent. In some cases, having a booking agent will be counterproductive. But what you should be thinking is that largely a booking agent should be someone who is doing some legwork and research for you to help you in the process. That's the role they play, and that's the only role they should be playing. So in a lot of ways, you can have a good VA do it for you. So that's the message I want to give you. So with that, I want to talk about the process of what we're doing internally, because I'm not working with a booking agent, but my team and I are looking to get me booked on a good number of shows. And again, we have a number, but it's not like, we're going to be like, "Oh, if we didn't hit that quota, we're bad." And we're not going to book me on shows that don't work. And again, it helps that I just put out a post on my Facebook page and, at some point in December, and I ended up, booking myself into like 10 or 11 shows right away this year. So I was able to do that because I posted something on my page, and I didn't even have to work very hard at it. I will be able to connect with a lot of my friends and peers that know me, et cetera, and get myself booked. But largely what I'm talking about here is the process of connecting and potentially getting booked on shows where I don't yet have a connection with the folks. So I want to walk you through the process because it is a multi-step process that is involving work by my team and me. So let me walk through it. We're going to start the process where it would make sense to do of identifying potential podcasts that we think would, maybe be a good fit. And this is going to be a combination of me, kind of going from my Dream 100 and saying, who are those people and do they have shows, et cetera. And then going a bit deeper and saying, kind of then going down and asking, my team to think of, are there other people that they can think of, et cetera. The good news is that we also have a ton of data. So I have my Facebook group, and a lot of people have joined that. And, I ask them, who else do they follow and how do they hear about me? So those pieces of info are great pieces of info for me to say, okay, hey, those are people who I might want to listen, say, hey, if they have a podcast, they might be a good fit for me. So that's a way to start. And we're basically brainstorming, creating a big list. Then my team is going to do a first cut, except for ones that I say, yes, those are definitely on the list. For other ones, they're going to do a first cut to kind of give a yay or a nay. And again, the way it'll be is, hey, if it's a clear yes, if they think it's a clear yes, great. If they think it's a clear no, great. We can eliminate it. If they're not sure, we're going to keep it on the list for a while. And they're going to listen and they will identify some episodes that they think maybe are kind of good example episodes or things that maybe kind of fit in with messaging and things that I talk about and things that I would like talking about, et cetera. And they'll point those out for me. And so those episodes or those shows that then make the cut, then I'm going to listen to those episodes. And it's going to be multiple episodes per show. I'm not going to just listen to one episode and say, okay, I know what this show's about. Because, anyone knows that you could have one episode of a podcast that seems interesting, but then when you listen to the rest of it, it's very different. And so I want to get a sampling and make sure that I think it's a good fit and that I would want to associate my brand with that show. So again, we identify. Next, my team listens and they identify some episodes for me to listen to. Then I listen to it. And then from there, I make the decision of, hey, is this a podcast that, I would like to be on or not? So again, kind of I give it a thumbs up or a thumbs down. And again, so if my team gives it a thumbs down or I give it a thumbs down, it's off the list. We don't do it. But if it makes it past my team and it makes it past me, then we're going to think through what is the angle that we kind of could logically pitch based upon my messaging and the messaging that I want to get out there. And, again, I've kind of identified three major areas for what I can appear on. One is the legal stuff for online entrepreneurs. That's an obvious one. So, I obviously talk about that and it's an obvious fit and it's something that kind of I have as a unique thing. Then the next angle is email marketing because I am passionate about that. I love it. People talk about how great I am at it. So I love talking about email marketing and specifically, weekly emails. Yeah, I can talk about promo emails, but what I love and my passion is really the weekly emails. And then the final angle is kind of the broader, the fans first concept of high touch connection based marketing. And there's a lot of different messages in there. I mean, some of them are, that one of the things I like to say is that basically I'm using marketing that brick and mortar like stores, especially in small towns, used forever. So I'm not really innovating. And I talk about how it's the basics and doing the basics right. And I talk about you don't need, ninja tactics and strategies and things like that. So all of that stuff can talk about. And I've got stories galore about how, doing that one unscalable thing that some people would tell me not to do has made all the difference. And so that's kind of the final angle. So we're going to look and say, okay, which of those potential angles works best? And how do we tie it in with this person's messaging? So that's kind of the next piece is to figure out our angle and our pitch that we're going to make them. But again, I want to be very clear. Notice there I said we figure out what our angle and our pitch is. We are not yet pitching. This is merely kind of coming up with the candidates and coming up with the people we're going to be talking to. The next piece is to do the engagement. And with each person, each potential show, we're going to create a custom engagement and pitch plan. And again, I want to be very clear and make sure you heard me there. I said engagement and pitch plan. What that's going to look like is it's going to look like me engaging with the host on social media on a regular basis, not once or twice and then being done, but engaging with them and their content and their community and their fans. So again, it means we have to figure out, where are they? Are they mainly on Instagram? If so, I'm going to engage there. Are they mainly on Facebook? If so, I'm going to engage there, but potentially both. So I'm going to do those things to engage and kind of start building a relationship and a connection right there. Then there will be a piece of being conscious about sharing their podcast and episodes of their show that I particularly like on social media. So it's going to be sharing the episode and explaining what I liked about it in that share. I'm not going to just say, oh, here's an episode, but I'm going to share it, tag them, and explain what's great about it, right? Because I'll just tell you, me as a host, when I see that you shared my podcast and talked about what you loved about it, that makes me, I appreciate it. So again, just to be clear, if you want me to share something that you say in Instagram stories, one of the best ways to do that is to talk about me and my show and how much you love it, because we're all basically people who want people to say we're great, and then we're going to tell everybody else that, hey, this person thinks I'm great, because it's much better than me saying I'm great. So just a little hint there, and I do that because as I'm recording this podcast, there was something funny that happened earlier today because, someone, Lexi Neff, who's one of my followers, like, she shared something about, my show about, about one of my shows being awesome. And then it did, so my team and I saw it. We said, hey, we got to, reshare this on stories. So we did. And then once we did that, there was another story about how appreciative Lexi was that I had again shared that story. So I had to tell that story because that kind of is what brought that to mind. But again, I just tell you, those are the kinds of things that will get you noticed. Now, the next two things, though, are I'm going to leave an honest rating and review of the show on iTunes where I listen to it, and it's going to be a good rating and review. And by good, I don't mean, effusive necessarily. Yes, I mean, I don't want to be on the show unless I would give it a good review, but I'm going to take time to craft a meaningful review that I believe will have value to that host. And that's the kind of thing, again, those kinds of actions and the high touch, unscalable work is going to help you. And then I will send a direct message to the host on social media about some of the episodes. Yes, I will share, but also send them a message saying, I love this episode. I loved how you talked about X, Y, and Z, and here's what I loved about it. And again, I'm going to tell you, let me give you behind the scenes of why you want to do all of these different things. Because depending on who the host is and depending on how big they are and what their team is like, I'm going to let you in on a secret. It very well may be that they may not see that you shared their show. Okay, because sometimes, hosts, they've outsourced that to team, to a social media manager or something else. But, and general engagement in their community, again, they may not notice. But chances are most hosts will notice those things, will notice if you DM them. If you take the time to send them a direct message, most hosts will notice it because that's the place where most of us are. Now, some hosts don't respond to all the DMs, but most of them will know and will recognize it. So that's the importance of doing all of those levels. So then once I've done all of that over a period of time, and started to build a rapport, then and only then will I pitch myself to the show. And at that point, I'm not pitching cold. And again, because I have done this in a very meaningful way, not in a templatized way where I'm just saying the exact same thing to every person, I will have built some connection with the people. And then at that point, a pitch will be more well received. So again, just FYI, if you're out trying to pitch people, if you were trying to pitch to be on my show and you went through all that, if you were one of my customers, if you were someone in my Fans First Society, so it's oh, hey, this person knows what I teach, and then you were pitching me and said, hey, I've got this cool angle of this thing I teach I want to talk to you about, I'm going to be much more receptive. Not because you're a customer per se. It's not because, oh, you paid me so I should listen. It's because we have a connection. And because I get you probably aren't going to give me a pitch that makes absolutely positively no sense for my show. So I want you to be thinking about it in that way. So that, in a nutshell, is the process that we're building out in my business. And you could build out the same process. If you have a VA, the VA could do most of these things for you, where I said it's my team. Now, I also want you to be thinking about, if you're going to outsource this and hire a podcast booking team, I think you should be looking for a team that will integrate with you to do a process that is something like this. And so that's why I'm saying, in your questions of how they're going to build a plan to pitch you to a podcast, you're going to get a good sense of what are they going to be doing. So that will really give you the sense of, kind of how things work. And, I just wanted to give you that explanation because I thought it would be helpful. So that's it. I believe that being a guest on other people's platforms is one of the best things you can do, one of the best ways to kind of expand your reach, especially if you are just starting out. If you have a podcast, being a guest on other people's podcasts, one of the best ways to grow your reach, because you're going to be talking to people who listen to podcasts, right? So they're more likely to come and listen to your podcast. So that's the other thing I would tell you is, if you're allowed to pitch something at the end of a podcast, often the best thing is tell them about your podcast, if you have one, because you are talking to people who clearly like this kind of message that you're offering and listen to podcasts. So that's a great way to grow your reach. It's a great way generally to kind of get people to be aware of you and to really start to expand your reach. So highly recommend it, but you've got to do it the right way. And if you come at it as I want to build relationships and I'm going to focus on quality, not quantity, you can construct a plan for pitching based on kind of what I talked about here that will be very helpful. Now, what I'm going to do, we have created a freebie for this episode that is kind of the pitch checklist. It's going to go down the list of all of the things that I've talked about here. So you don't have to, if your notes weren't great, hey, if you want to go back and listen again, I'm all for that, but you don't have to. You can kind of go and grab this nice PDF freebie my team's going to create about creating a pitch and kind of soup to nuts about how to do the process so that you will have the highest chance of getting booked. If you want to get that, head over to bobbyklinck.com/episode 133 freebie. Again, bobbyklinck.com/episode 133 freebie. So again, it's the numbers 133 freebie. Head over there. You can download the freebie and you'll have your pitch checklist so you can know exactly kind of how to go about doing it and how to do it in the right way. So that's it for this episode of the Certified Badass Online Marketing Podcast. Can't wait to come. I've got another great episode coming out this Friday. But in the meantime, go out and build the badass business of your dreams. That's it for this episode of the Certified Badass Online Marketing Podcast. Make sure to tune in next time. And in the meantime, go out and build the badass business of your dreams.